Hi, I'm Shonda. My grandfather's casket was barely in the ground when Dad called a family meeting. I walked in to find forged documents, my name erased, their pockets full. What they didn't know? I hadn't come alone. When they saw who stepped in beside me, every face went pale. That's when I realized this fight was never about grief, it was about control, and I was never supposed to win. Before we begin, where are you listening from, and what time is it? I read every comment. The scent of cut grass and polished mahogany drifted through the chapel as I slipped into the last row, my heels echoing a second too long on the marble aisle. Black lace or not, I still felt underdressed for my own grandfather's send-off. My sister Asha craned her neck from the front pew, offered a thin smile that looked more like a warning, then leaned toward our brother Miles. A whisper, too soft to catch yet sharp enough to sting, floated back to me. I'd heard that whisper my entire life, the one that said, "Shonda's here, but she doesn't belong up front." The pastor began a hymn I barely registered. Instead, I counted the hollow spaces around me, a seat for my late mother left deliberately vacant, 3 rows reserved for board members from Granddad's lumber cooperative, and a single aisle cutting me off from the rest of my blood. When the hymn ended, Dad strode to the lectern in a gray suit 3 shades lighter than grief. "My father," he began, voice steady as a quarterly forecast, "was a builder of things that matter." He spoke of markets, margins, expansions, never once of Saturday fishing trips or the smell of cedar shavings on Granddad's work shirts. I folded my hands, listening to strangers nod at numbers. A breeze slipped through an open window. It carried me backward, 6 years old, perched on Granddad's workbench, watching him fold a linen napkin into a flimsy white crane. "One day, kiddo," he'd said, pressing the last crease, "you'll fly above all this noise." He'd tucked the bird behind my ear like a secret. Now, in my purse, rested a napkin I'd folded myself the night he died. Clumsy, but it would have to do. When the eulogy ended, family filed out for the graveside service. The afternoon sun was relentless, bouncing off polished headstones. Dad recited a verse, his voice cracking only when the wind changed direction. I stepped forward, placed my linen crane atop the casket's brass lid. It fluttered, caught under the preacher's shadow, and stayed. No applause, no acknowledgement. Except from Mr. Alvarez, Granddad's retired foreman, who met my eyes with the quiet respect of someone who'd heard the old man's stories firsthand. After the final prayer, the lawyer, Mr. Wilkes, invited immediate family to a side room in the estate's carriage house. Oil portraits watched as we settled into high-back chairs. I took the one closest to the exit. Old habits. Wilkes cleared his throat and opened a lacquered folder. "Per the decedent's instructions," he said, "his entire liquid estate, the controlling shares of Moore Timber Holdings, and all associated real property pass to his granddaughter, Shanda Elaine Bellamy." A chair leg scraped. Gasps ricocheted around mahogany walls. Dad's expression didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes shuddered. Asha's mouth opened, then shut like a cupboard. Miles muttered, "That can't be right." I stared at my hands, waiting for emotion to surface, but felt only a surge of white noise. Wilkes read the clause again, slower this time. "Because she saw me as more than money, I leave her all of mine." The room pulsed. Then Dad turned to me, voice low enough for family ears only. "You know what this means, don't you?" He didn't wait for an answer. "We'll have a meeting. Sunday. For the good of the family." His hand clamped my shoulder. Steady, practiced. "Be smart." Outside, asphalt sizzled. While mourners drifted toward catered lemonade, Dad steered a cluster of relatives away from me. I caught fragments. Guardianship, voting rights, bad optics. Mr. Alvarez tipped his cap as he walked past. "Your granddad trusted you," he murmured. "That's heavier than money." I drove home on autopilot, the napkin crane cradled on the passenger seat. Twilight bled into my apartment by the time I kicked off my shoes. Phone battery at 18%, voicemail already full. 8 missed calls from Asha, an unknown Dallas number, one from Dad that lasted 3 seconds of silence. I plugged the phone in, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't drink. The screen lit up with a new notification. Blocked number. Message, be careful. They're not planning a conversation. They're planning a takedown. I leaned against the counter, thumbs hovering. Who is this? I typed. 3 dots pulsed, then a reply. Let's just say, I owe your grandfather everything. I read the words again. Not threat. Warning. And it felt oddly like relief. I stared at the glowing message until the screen dimmed. My heartbeat wasn't panic, more like a drum roll before a verdict I'd known was coming. I tapped call. 1 ring, 2, voicemail. A muffled voice slipped through. They forged documents. Be ready. The tone was distorted but calm, like someone reading a weather report about an approaching storm. I set the phone on the counter, exhaled through my nose. Kitchen clock read 9:46 p.m., still the night of the funeral. Outside, traffic on Congress Avenue thinned to a hush, neon signs blinking like tired eyes. I pressed my back to the fridge, letting the cold steel settle my thoughts. Who would stake a warning this precise? And why did it feel oddly familiar? Memory tugged. 2 summers ago, after a 4th of July barbecue, Granddad had pulled me aside while everyone else argued over dessert. He wiped barbecue sauce from his beard, leaned down and whispered, "Never sign a thing unless it comes through Leland. Promise me." I'd laughed, thought he meant some contractor. Tonight that name tasted different, heavy, like granite in my mouth. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, opened a forensic lookup tool I kept for work, keyed in the incoming line. It traced to a prepaid cell, no surprise, but the last Wi-Fi hop pinged off a private network tagged to Shore Consulting Veterans Trust, my pro bono case from 3 years ago. That case's lead counsel? Leland Shore. So whoever warned me wasn't guessing. They knew the playbook. Before I could dig deeper, the phone rang again, this time my cousin Ellie. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered on the second buzz. "Sean, you okay?" Her voice shook like loose glass. "I'm upright. What's wrong?" "Dad's gathering everyone at Uncle Ray's place tomorrow morning. They're saying you're unstable, too emotional to handle the inheritance. At least they upgraded from ungrateful. Did you see what they planned to wave in my face?" Ellie hesitated. There was a notary stamp on something, couldn't read details, and a pen I've never seen you use. Asha loved props. A fountain pen would make the lie feel like history. "Ellie," I said, softening my tone, "if you stay in that room, make sure you have nowhere else to be. This won't be quick." She inhaled sharply. "I'm not brave like you." "Neither am I. I'm just tired of ducking." When we hung up, I crossed to my bedroom closet, knelt, and opened the fireproof safe. Inside, among tax returns and a spare passport, sat a sealed envelope dated 2 years prior, Granddad's slanted script across the front. I'd never had the nerve to open it. Tonight felt earned. I slid a letter opener under the flap. "If you're reading this, they've made their move. Don't go in alone. Call him." Under the note lay an ivory business card, Leland Shore Esquires, embossed in navy ink, address in the hills west of the city. Wind rattled the apartment window. Decision made itself. I changed into jeans and a blazer, tucked the napkin crane into my breast pocket, and pocketed a small canister of pepper spray, habit from late-night site inspections. Keys, phone, letter, out the door before dread could suggest pajamas instead. Austin at 10 p.m. smelled of mesquite smoke and post-concert sweat. I steered my aging Volvo across the river, up switchbacks lined with live oaks until GPS announced the cul-de-sac. Leland's house sat back from the street, porch light glowing amber. I knocked twice. Footsteps, then the door swung wide. A tall man in rolled-up sleeves, salt and pepper hair, appraised me over half-moon glasses. "Shanda Bellamy," he said, like finishing a crossword clue. "Been expecting you." I wish I could say the feeling's mutual. He stepped aside. Mahogany floors reflected lamplight. The place smelled of pipe tobacco and fresh copy paper. In his study, he offered water, not small talk, I shook my head. He pulled a manila folder from a drawer. Your grandfather planned for tonight. Unfortunately, so did your father. He laid out 2 documents. First, Granddad's certified trust, the one Wilkes had read. Second, a glossy color scan. My signature on a transfer of authority I'd never seen. My loops were sloppy, the date font mismatched. Still, it looked official. They've already filed this at First Hill Bank, Leland said. Tomorrow, they'll petition for a temporary conservatorship, claiming you're unfit. How'd they get a notary to sign? Money talks, but sloppiness shouts. He pointed to a smudge where the ink bled. Different printer cartridge, easy to prove in court, hard to explain on TV. My stomach clenched, but mine sped faster. Why the rush? Because, Leland leaned back, they think you're still the girl who folded napkins and stayed quiet when the shouting started. I met his gaze, steady. They don't know the girl kept the receipts. A wry smile tugged his lip. Then let's make sure they find out. He slid a tumbler of water toward me. No whiskey. Nothing that could be twisted later. Battle lines etched themselves in that silence. Leland didn't flinch when I said it. He just gave me a slow nod, stepped aside, and motioned toward a long table cluttered with documents, legal pads, and a laptop that was already running, recording. A soft beep confirmed it. The next afternoon came too fast. I spent the morning pacing, reviewing the letter Grandpa left, sipping black coffee I barely tasted. My fingers traced the edges of the business card, Leland Shore, Esquire, the name now etched into the next chapter of my life. By 4 p.m., I was pulling into the driveway of the house I used to call home. It was still the same ranch-style house with weathered shutters and the faded Texas flag on the porch. The only thing that had changed was me. I parked, stepped out, and straightened my blazer. Dark navy, pressed crisp. My heels clicked against the stone walkway like a metronome counting down the seconds. Leland stepped out of the passenger seat behind me. A younger man followed, mid-30s, composed, carrying a slim black case. Neither of them said a word. They didn't have to. Inside, the air was too still. The living room had been cleared of its usual clutter. No family photos, no knickknacks, just a polished wood table, 6 chairs, and a pitcher of iced tea no one had touched. Dad sat at the head. Harland. Cold eyes behind bifocals. Miles slouched beside him, phone half hidden under the table. Uncle Ray leaned back like he owned the place, legs crossed, chewing gum like we were at a ball game. No one looked at Leland. Not once. "Shanda," Dad said, standing halfway like some kind of mock greeting. "Glad you came. We've been concerned about you." I didn't answer. I took the empty chair across from them, Leland and his assistant standing behind me. "I imagine the past few days have been overwhelming," Dad went on, clasping his hands like a counselor. "Your grandfather meant a lot to all of us, and this estate situation, well, it's complicated. Emotional stress can cloud anyone's judgment." Then he slid a folder across the table toward me. "Just a few simple documents, standard stuff. We thought it best if you allowed me to handle the estate temporarily. Just until you're ready." Miles chimed in without looking up. "You know, like always, let Dad handle it." I didn't touch the folder. Not yet. Instead, I reached for the pen he'd placed on top of it. An elegant gold Mont Blanc, with a subtle engraving near the clip. I recognized it immediately. It was my grandfather's. He used that pen to sign every major real estate contract since the 80s. It wasn't just a writing instrument, it was a symbol of trust, legitimacy, legacy, and they were using it now, hoping I wouldn't notice. I ran my fingers over the engraving. Then, without a word, I slipped it into my purse. Dad's jaw tightened. Uncle Ray muttered, "That's not yours." I looked at him. "It's not yours either." Silence stretched. Then Leland stepped forward, quietly setting a thick envelope on the table. It bore an official seal, blue, embossed, and a certified court stamp. "This is a copy of a letter filed with Travis County Probate Court," he said, voice calm. It designates Ms. Shanda as the sole trustee of the Allen family estate, effective 6 months before Mr. Allen's passing. Miles blinked. What? Harlan's face turned an alarming shade of red. Where the hell did you get that? Leland didn't flinch. It was retrieved directly from a registered security vault, with Judge Epps's oversight. There is time-stamped video if you'd like to verify. Uncle Ray lunged forward, reaching for the envelope. This is a setup. I placed my hand on the envelope before he could touch it. Don't. Miles stood, knocking over his chair. This is fake. She forged it. No, I said, voice even. I didn't. But if you'd like to accuse me formally, we can file discovery. Every email, every document you've touched, subpoenaed. Every notary you've ever called, deposed. They stared. And just so we're clear, I added, I have no intention of hiding anything. But if you continue down this road, we go public. Every forged document will be traced, every lie exposed, and I won't be the one who ends up behind bars. Dad leaned forward, voice low and sharp. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. That landed harder than I expected. A pause settled in the room. I looked at him, not with rage, just a quiet ache I didn't bother hiding anymore. Then it's a good thing she isn't here to see what you became. Uncle Ray huffed, reaching into his briefcase and pulling out another envelope, thinner, older. Let's see what happens when this goes to court. I stared at it, my pulse steady, my hands resting flat on the table. Because I already knew what was inside. The moment Uncle Ray pulled that envelope out, I knew exactly what was inside. I didn't need to open it to feel the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest, but I didn't flinch. I simply sat back in my chair, adjusted my blouse cuffs, and waited for him to make his move. He slid the envelope across the coffee table like it was some final card in a poker game. This, he said with a smug curl at the corner of his mouth, is what we'll bring to court if you keep pushing. I opened it carefully, not for me, but for them. Inside was a single document, printed on crisp, off-white paper, trying its best to look official. The heading read, Amendment to the Horace B. McAllister Trust. It claimed my father, Harland, had been made sole executor just 2 months ago, with me receiving a modest annual stipend. Modest. That word sat like vinegar in my throat. It was all dressed up to look legal. Signature lines, a seal, even a notary stamp, but they'd missed something crucial, something that cracked their whole illusion right down the center. I kept my tone neutral. This address here, I said, tapping the line that read, witnessed at 4310 Wilmer Drive, is outdated. That house was sold in 2016. Ray chuckled, clearly unbothered. So what? It's still notarized, dated, clean. That's when Leland leaned forward just a little, his voice low and composed. Forging a document using a non-existent property is a rookie mistake. Not smart, gentlemen. There was a beat of silence, sharp, like the snap of a twig. Harlan's knuckles whitened around the armrest. Miles stopped tapping his foot. Even Uncle Ray's smirk faltered. I gently placed the paper back in its envelope and handed it to Leland. We'll keep this for the record. That was when Harlan's restraint snapped. That money was never meant for you, he shouted, rising from his seat. His voice cracked, not just with anger, but something more desperate. I didn't stand. I didn't need to. It was meant for the one person who never asked for it, I said, locking eyes with him. Me. Then I pulled out the small voice recorder from my blazer pocket, the one my grandfather had left in a fireproof box, one of many he'd entrusted to Leland months before his death. I clicked play. Horace's voice came through the speaker, gravelly but firm. Shanda is the only one I trust. She never asked for a dime. The rest, they see the money, not the name. The room went silent. Not even the floor creaked beneath us. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the wall clock, and the sound of 3 grown men realizing they'd lost control of the narrative. Miles shoved himself out of his chair and stormed down the hallway. A door slammed seconds later. Uncle Ray snatched his phone off the table. I'm calling Taylor, our attorney. Leland didn't even look at him. You may want to tell him to start prepping for a deposition. Harlan dropped onto the couch like a deflated balloon. His face was pale now, lips pursed like he was swallowing something bitter. I sat still, letting it all sink in. I had come to this house knowing they'd try to strip me of my name, my legacy. But what they didn't realize, what they still couldn't grasp, was that I wasn't the same girl who used to be silenced at Sunday dinner. I had learned not to raise my voice, not to fight back with fury, but that didn't mean I was weak. It meant I had learned to choose my weapons. And right now, my weapon was the truth. You didn't gather the family to discuss anything, I said softly. You gathered them to watch me fall, to humiliate me. But all you've really done is shown me who you are. Harlan didn't answer. He couldn't. The tension had turned the living room into something colder than a courtroom. More intimate, yes, but just as ruthless. There were no gavels, no jury, but the verdict had already started to settle into the creases of their faces. Then came a knock at the front door. It was sharp, firm, not rushed, not hesitant. Leland stood slowly, adjusting his blazer as he walked toward the entrance. And I knew, even before the door opened, it wasn't the police. It was someone they never expected. Leland cracked the door, and every pair of eyes in the living room followed the widening slice of twilight. It wasn't a patrol officer or some jittery process server. Standing there was Harlan Wilkes, senior partner at Wilkes & Harper, the firm that had overseen Grandpa's affairs for 3 decades. His charcoal suit looked untouched by the humid air. He tipped his hat to no one in particular, then stepped inside with a document case tucked under his arm. Dad's shoulders stiffened as if a cold draft had blown through. "Mr. Wilkes," he said, voice suddenly polite and brittle, "this is a private discussion." Wilkes didn't break stride. "Private, yes, but legally relevant." He greeted me with a respectful nod. "Ms. Shanda, I have instructions to deliver 2 items directly to you." The floor seemed to tilt, but I kept my expression neutral. "Then by all means." He snapped open the case, drew out a thick folio stamped with the probate court seal and today's date. "Your grandfather arranged for this to be released if any dispute arose." His tone carried the weight of a final move in chess. "Inside is a notarized amendment dated 2 months before his passing. It supersedes every prior version." He handed the folio across the coffee table. I opened it slowly. There, in black ink, was his unmistakable signature. The language was unambiguous. I received everything: shares, land, liquid assets. No carve-outs, no watchdog committee, no modest stipend. Silence seemed to swallow the room. Even the air conditioner quit humming. Miles muttered, "This can't be right." But the fight had drained from his voice. Uncle Ray cleared his throat, forcing bravado. "Looks official, sure, but we'll contest it." Wilkes calmly slid a flash drive beside the folio. "You're welcome to try. That drive holds time-stamped footage of your father." He glanced at mine. "Signing in the presence of 2 licensed notaries and Judge Epps himself. Chain of custody is intact." Dad's face lost its remaining color. "Horace never told me he updated anything," he whispered. "He didn't trust you to honor it," Wilkes replied, so gently the sentence stung worse. Then he produced a second envelope, smaller, sealed with red wax. "Personal correspondence," he said, giving it only to me. My hands trembled, for just a breath, as I broke the seal. "Shanda, if you're reading this, they tried to take what's yours. Stand your ground. And if you ever doubt yourself, look for the second box. Love, Grandad." The room blurred, but I kept my spine straight. I read the words aloud, my voice steadier than my pulse. The moment I finished, Ray's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen. The gum he'd been chewing went still between his teeth. Whatever the text said drained him quiet. Harlan eyed him. "What now?" Ray swallowed. "Cousin Ellie just flipped. Says she's forwarding every message to Shanda's lawyer. She doesn't want in on this." Dad pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes watering. Whether from rage or fear, hard to tell. "This "Isn't legal," he rasped. "It's airtight," Wilkes replied, "and filed, effective immediately." Arguments broke out like sudden hail. Miles blamed Ray. Ray blamed bad advice. Dad blamed anybody within reach. Words overlapped. Embezzlement, perjury, public embarrassment. Through it all, I sat still, feeling less vindicated than strangely weightless, as if I'd set down a burden no one else had noticed I carried. "You invited me here to sign my future away," I said, lifting my gaze. The room quieted on instinct. "But you just signed your own ending." No screaming, no gloating, just that sentence, and the slow realization sinking into their faces. Wilkes closed his case. "One last item," he added. "Your grandfather instructed me to mention a second box in the garage. We located it last week but left it undisturbed for Ms. Shanda." A shaft of evening light cut through the window, catching the dust in midair. My heartbeat found a new rhythm. Anticipation, not fear. "I'll take a look," I said, rising. Leland moved to my side, steady, almost protective. Wilkes gestured toward the back hallway. "Right this way." I followed Mr. Wilkes down the hallway, past the kitchen that still smelled faintly of burnt coffee, and out the back door into the twilight. Cicadas hummed in the oak trees, a thick chorus that made the evening feel heavier than the Texas heat. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the certainty that everything was about to shift again. The detached garage sat 50 yards from the main house. Grandpa built it himself decades ago. Stucco walls, wide cedar doors weathered silver by the sun. Wilkes lifted the latch and the hinges groaned like old bones. Inside, a single bulb flickered to life, casting a yellow cone over dusty workbenches and tarped lawn equipment. "There," he said, pointing to the far corner. Under a worn canvas lay a steamer trunk the color of dried blood, brass banding dulled with age. My name, Shanda Elaine, was written in Grandpa's looping hand across a luggage tag. The sight nearly buckled my knees. I knelt, brushed away cobwebs, and released the clasp. It snapped open with a timid pop, as if the trunk itself knew it held secrets too loud for the room. The scent of cedar and old ink met me first. On top rested a stack of leather-bound journals, each labeled by year. Beneath them, tied with twine, were Polaroids. Grandpa and me fishing at Lake Travis, the two of us painting the tool shed, me at 14 holding my first summer paycheck while he beamed beside me. I hadn't seen these photos in years, some never. My throat tightened with a feeling that was part joy, part sorrow. A small velvet box peeked from the corner. Inside lay his bronze star, tarnish just beginning to creep along the edges. I cupped it in my palm, felt its cool weight, and understood why he'd hidden it here. He wanted me to remember courage was earned. At the bottom of the trunk, tucked beside a letter addressed to the state governor, sealed, never mailed, was a false plywood panel, its tiny finger notch barely visible. I eased it up. That's where I found the flash drive, black, unmarked. Grandpa had taped a note to it, for Shanda's eyes only. My pulse hammered as I slipped it into the side pocket of my blazer. Somehow, I already knew what I would find. Back in the house, Wilkes and I borrowed Miles's abandoned laptop, still open on the dining table. The family had scattered. Miles pacing out front with a cigarette, Ray whispering urgently on his phone, Dad sitting rigid on the couch like a man awaiting sentence. They didn't notice us. I inserted the drive. Folders appeared, timestamps, camera angles. One was labeled, "The Night They Came." I clicked. The first clip showed the den 2 months ago. Dad and Ray entered through the side door, glancing over their shoulders. Dad rifled through Grandpa's desk drawers, tossing files onto the floor. Ray fed documents into the fireplace, flames licking higher. The camera's night vision cast everything in eerie green, but there was no mistaking their faces. At one point, Ray held up a paper, grinning, before consigning it to the fire. Dad nodded, lips moving, but the footage had no sound. A second file carried Grandpa's voice, recorded on his home office intercom. "If they try to silence you, don't scream," he said calmly. "Just show them what they didn't know you had." Tears blurred the screen, not from triumph, but from finally being believed. Proof that every sideways glance, every dismissive pat on the head had been deliberate. I copied the videos to my phone, then snapped the laptop shut. Wilkes watched me wipe my cheeks. "What now?" "Now," I whispered. "We wait." I slid the flash drive back into my pocket, alongside the napkin crane that felt suddenly heavier. "They'll make another move. When they do, we'll be ready." He nodded, eyes soft. "I'll have forensic duplicates made first thing." I returned to the garage, lowered the trunk lid, and smoothed the canvas over it. The journals and photos would stay hidden for now, not as weapons, just as reminders that at least one person in this family had loved me without condition. The cicadas had quieted when I stepped back inside. The living room lights were dimmed, furniture askew, iced tea sweating on a coaster. Everyone else had vanished to lick their wounds or craft new plots. Everyone except Leland. He sat alone at the dining table, elbows on his knees, eyes glassy. In his hand was a single sheet of paper I had not seen before. "Shanda," he said, voice hoarse, "you need to read this." I didn't even make it all the way into the dining room before I stopped cold. Leland was still sitting there, alone in the dim light, a piece of paper trembling in his hands. His eyes, red-rimmed, wet, met mine like he'd been waiting, not just for me, but for the right moment to break. He didn't speak right away, just held out the paper slowly like it weighed more than it should. I walked over and took it gently, unfolding it with care. The handwriting hit me before the words did. I knew those letters, that curving script. Granddaddy's. I sat across from Leland and read. "This family built walls where they should have built bridges. I tried to fix that. I tried to teach them, but they were already too far gone. Only one of them ever stayed behind when I was sick. Only one asked how I felt, not what I had. You'll know who deserves this legacy. R." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the paper began to blur, and my fingers curled at the edges. It wasn't a legal document, it wasn't notarized or stamped, but it was real. A kind of will that mattered more than the kind filed in court. A will of the heart. "I found it tucked in his Bible," Leland finally said, voice rough. "Behind a photo of you. I didn't know if I should show you. But after what I saw out there, after what you showed me, I couldn't keep quiet anymore." I folded the letter carefully and looked at him. The weight he carried showed in his shoulders now, drawn, tense, like he hadn't slept right in months, maybe years. "I knew they were up to something," he said. "Dad and Uncle Ray. I didn't know all the details, not the camera stuff, not the USB, but I saw the drafts. They kept calling them adjustments. They said it was all just protecting what's rightfully ours." He looked away. I didn't stop them. Silence filled the space between us like fog. "I didn't think you'd fight back," he whispered. "They always said you'd fold, just like Mom did." That name, that memory. I saw her then, my mother, standing in this same room years ago, silent, small, with every set of eyes on her like she was prey. There had been a family talk then, too, and she'd left with her pride shredded and her voice unheard. I was 10. I'd never known the full story, just fragments, but I saw it now, how this family passed down silence like a trait, trained us to nod, smile, and disappear if we weren't chosen. "I remember how they laughed when she left," I said, "how Granddad didn't speak for days after. They erased her without saying her name." Leland nodded slowly. "And now they tried to erase you." The quiet between us didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt necessary. A breath being held between generations and finally released. Then he reached into his jacket and placed another paper on the table, signed, initialed. "I'm not signing the final agreement they drafted," he said, meeting my eyes again. "And I told the attorney to revoke my consent to the probate motion. They can't push it through without me. And I'm testifying with you." It didn't register at first. I stared at the form, reading the line with his name, the date, the clear signature. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I reached across the table and held his hand. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like holding a stranger's. "It's still your fight," he murmured, "but I'm not in their corner anymore." I exhaled deeply and leaned back. My mind was already moving. "Leland," I said quietly, "I need you to meet with them again." His eyes flickered. "What?" "Pretend nothing's changed. Let them believe you're still on their side. Just get them talking. Let them brag. They always do." He hesitated. "You want me to spy on them?" "I want the truth, and they've never been afraid to speak it around you." He rubbed his forehead. "They'll know something's off. They'll know for sure when you wear this." I stood and walked toward the sideboard. From the drawer, I pulled out the small pin, Granddaddy's, the one from the trunk. I pressed it into his hand. "They'll recognize it. They'll know exactly what it means." He stared at the pin for a long time. "They'll know I switched sides." "Let's hope they talk before they think." Leland let out a breath that sounded half like a laugh, half like a sigh. "You've changed," he said. "You used to play small." I gave a faint smile. "Turns out I was only ever quiet because I was listening." He rose slowly, pocketed the pin, and nodded. "All right. I'll set it up for tomorrow. Brunch, probably. You know how they like to scheme over eggs Benedict." I followed him to the door, and before he left, he turned back. "You were always stronger than the rest of us, you know. We just didn't see it." I didn't answer, just closed the door behind him softly. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not even close. I lay in bed with the letter in my hands, rereading every line like it might change or reveal something new. Granddaddy's voice played in my memory. Leland's face, the footage, the burning fireplace, their arrogant certainty that no one would ever find out. They didn't just lie. They rewrote history. I turned to the ceiling, breathing slow, one hand resting on my chest to steady the storm inside. Outside, the cicadas buzzed and the trees swayed, like even the land knew something was coming. Then, just before the sky began to shift from black to gray, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. The message lit up my screen. "We know what you're doing. Stop before someone gets hurt." I sat up, blood thrumming in my ears. This wasn't just about money anymore. I sat up in bed. And I knew then, this wasn't just about money anymore. By the time the sun began slipping through the curtains, I was already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, the same sentence echoing in my mind like a warning shot. "We know what you're doing. Stop before someone gets hurt." I forwarded the message to my attorney and then to Leland without a single word attached. They'd understand the silence. By mid-morning, I was in a parked surveillance van outside the Travis County Country Club. Beside me was Angela Rivas, my attorney. She had her laptop open, headset on, and documents spread across her lap. Her fingers drummed against her knee, not from nerves but focus. "Mic check's good," she murmured, eyes on the monitor. "He's in position." Inside, Leland sat at a long mahogany table in the club's private boardroom, just him, Ray, and Uncle Glenn. It looked like any other celebratory business dinner: decanter of whiskey, linen napkins, polished cutlery. Leland had told them this was a pre-settlement celebration, since Shonda had come to her senses. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? Angela nudged me and handed over a pair of headphones. "They're talking." Ray's voice crackled through. "To be honest, I didn't think we'd pull it off this smooth," he said, laughing. "All that screaming she did last year, and now? Nothing but silence, just like her mother." Glenn chuckled, slurring a bit. "You remember how quick we got Mom to sign over that land back in '91? Same script, different actress." Angela looked at me. I didn't react. Ray went on. "Once probate's done, I'm selling that ranch first thing. I've already got an offshore account prepped. Glenn, your guy shred those boxes from the old storage unit?" "Yeah," Glenn answered. "Burned 'em. Even tossed the notary's little hush envelope into the mix." Angela mouthed, "Got it all." She tapped a key, marking the timestamp. Then came the part that stung. Glenn poured another drink, smirked, and said, "What kind of fool leaves $59 million to a girl who used to fold napkins for a living?" Laughter exploded on the other end of the line. There was a pause. You could hear the clink of glass and the low thrum of ambient jazz playing in the room. Then Leland spoke, calm, almost distant. "You're right. It was foolish," Glenn snorted. "See? Even you know it." "But," Leland continued, "she still got the last word." Silence. "I'm sorry?" Ray said. We watched on the monitor as Leland unpinned something from his collar, a small bronze pin, Grandpa's. He laid it on the table, then reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small mic device, tapping it twice. The color drained from their faces. "I didn't come here to toast," he said. "I came to witness." Angela hit save. Then she looked at me. "Time to move." That evening, we were downtown in the courthouse annex, filing the emergency injunction. Angela's voice was even, rehearsed, and backed by timestamps, audio files, and a notarized document from months ago, Grandpa's real final codicil. The judge granted the freeze on all estate assets. Within hours, Ray's financial activity was flagged and held. Glenn's accounts, too. Angela turned to me, closing her briefcase. "By this time tomorrow, they won't be able to pay for valet parking." I didn't smile. I just said, "We're not done yet." It was close to midnight when I left the courthouse. The air outside was heavy with the weight of what had just begun. But something felt off the moment we stepped onto the sidewalk. There were lights, cameras, people. I blinked under the harsh flash. Reporters rushed forward like a dam had burst. One shoved a microphone near my face. "Ms. Moore, did your own father forge your grandfather's will?" My breath caught, but only for a second. I looked directly into the lens, my voice steady. "I guess you'll find out in court." Cameras flashed, but I kept my gaze steady. "I guess you'll find out in court," I told the reporter, then walked straight to Angela's waiting car. 2 weeks later, with headlines still spinning, we drove east to Houston before dawn, the county where Grandpa had first registered Moore Timber Holdings and therefore where the estate battle would be decided. By 9:30 a.m., I stepped into Harris County Probate Courtroom 3B wearing a navy suit that once belonged to my mother. No mascara, no lipstick, nothing my father's attorney could label performance. The gallery buzzed with reporters, retired employees, even strangers who'd followed the story online. Dad sat at the defense table, eyes on the wooden surface. Uncle Glenn fiddled with his tie. Neither dared look my way. Judge Lacey entered, gray hair pulled into a neat twist, gavel poised. "We're here to determine the validity of the McAllister codicil and any competing instruments." Her tone made clear she'd tolerate zero theatrics. Angela rose first, handing clerks 3 evidence binders. "Your Honor, Exhibit A is the notarized codicil dated February 10th, stamped with Mr. McAllister's embossed seal." The court projector displayed Grandpa's signature, bold and familiar. Whispered gasps rippled behind me. I felt an odd calm, like standing in the eye of a storm I'd studied all my life. Exhibit B followed, metadata reports showing alterations to digital files 48 hours after Grandpa's death. Exhibit C, the audio of Ray, Glenn, and Leland at the country club, their voices bragging about shredding ledgers and bribing a notary. The playback filled the courtroom. I kept my eyes forward while my father's own words condemned him. Ray's lawyer leapt up. "Objection, undue influence. Ms. McAllister exploited her grandfather's declining health." Judge Lacey lifted an eyebrow. "You'll need proof." She nodded to Angela. "Call your final witness." The side door opened, and Ms. Alvarez, Grandpa's hospice nurse, entered in teal scrubs. Dad's shoulders slumped. Under oath, she explained that a week before Grandpa passed, he dictated the new codicil from his hospital bed. "He told me Shanda had earned everything through years of loyalty," she said, voice trembling. She unfolded a handwritten note he'd asked her to keep. "To the only one who never asked for anything, this is for your peace of mind." The bailiff handed the page to the judge. Even the court clerk dabbed a tear. Ray's lawyer tried a final swing, citing emotional manipulation, but it landed soft. The judge tapped her gavel. The February codicil stands. All subsequent transfers are null. Mr. Ray McAllister and Mr. Glenn McAllister are referred to the district attorney for investigation. Ms. Shanda McAllister is confirmed as sole trustee of the estate. A permanent protective order is granted. The room exhaled. Dad stared at the floor, ashen, while deputies guided him aside to discuss next steps. I picked up my leather folder, hands steady. Outside on the courthouse steps, microphones thrust toward me again, but this time the noise blurred into something harmless. I said only, "Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration." Then I walked to the rental car where Angela waited. We drove straight to Oakwood Cemetery. Late afternoon sun filtered through pecan trees, scattering gold across the marble graves. I knelt at Grandpa's plot, laid the court order across the stone, and whispered, "I kept my promise." When I stood, I noticed Mavis, our old neighbor, by the fence, arms folded, pride shining through quiet eyes. She gave one firm nod. No words needed. That evening, back at my apartment, I remembered the final envelope from Grandpa's safe labeled "Open only if it's truly yours." I broke the seal. Inside was a draft charter for the McAllister Foundation for Quiet Builders, my name already printed as chair. The mission line read, "Funding dreams no one else sees." I sank onto the couch, foundation papers in my lap, feeling a new kind of fullness, one that didn't come from winning, but from knowing where to begin. Have you ever had to fight your own family just to be seen? Tell me in the comments. I read every word.